Back on the record. Thank you. We'll resume the Care Board's hearing of September 10th. And just for the public, the rest of the agenda for today is there'll be a staff recommendation on CVMC enforcement. Then there'll be a UVM HN presentation. Then they'll have deliberations and a vote on Brattleboro and Copley. Then an executive session likely on UVM legal objections. And then a deliberation and vote on Porter. And then a deliberation and vote on CVMC. So I'll turn to Mr. Sutter for the CVMC enforcement update from staff, and I'll just note that Member Merman is recused and he is not in attendance.
Thank you, Chair Foster. So we're just going to quickly, I know we did this a couple weeks ago, but we're just a summary of their FY24 NPR overage. Briefly described the hospital's request for a budget adjustment, then staff's recommendations for a budget adjustment and enforcement, and then potential motion language for each. So there's two items related to their FY24 overage. There's CVMC's request to modify their FY24 NPR cap equivalent to the overage, and then Green Mountain Care Board's potential enforcement of CVMC's 24 overage. So the FY24 budget order established an NPR cap of about $275 million. CVMC exceeded their budget NPR by 23.7 or an 8.6% variance. And the threshold for potential enforcement by rule is variance of plus or minus 1%. Here's a summary of CVMC's FY24 overage for reference available in the presentation online that will be posted later. And then just reiterating what staff's recommendation around the budget adjustment from the prior presentation, staff does not recommend approving CVMC's request. They've not shown that their request for adjustments based on exceptional or unforeseen circumstances, and they've not justified their request to have their budget adjusted by the full amount of their overage of $23.7 million. Staff is recommending enforcement of 100% of the commercial overage and 30% of the public payer overage, however, which equates to about $11.7 million. And you can see the math derived there above. As we said a couple weeks ago, should the board choose to enforce this overage by targeting commercial revenue, staff recommends the following approach: issue a separate budget order modifying the future FY26 commercial NPR cap by an equivalent reduction and require CVMC to provide documentation to the board about how it will effectuate the decrease via changes to its commercial rate. And we have potential motion language for both of those discussed items here. So I will turn back to you, Chair Foster.
Okay, thank you. I'm not prepared to vote myself today, and I think we should probably wait until Friday, as I mentioned earlier, but thank you for the presentation. Is there any board comment or discussion at this time?
A quick question, Matt, thanks for your work here. Could you explain more about how you arrived at the 30% enforcement on public payment?
Sure. So as we discussed in the budget process, a lot of the underlying assumptions in their commercial rate ask rely on their budgeted public payer revenue. So building up to the total revenue required to cover their expense assumptions. And in cases where they're under budgeting or under assuming commercial or public payer revenue, they're going to correspondingly ask for a greater than necessary commercial rate ask to cover those modeled expenses. So it's important that we look at the public payer revenue as well, considering these budgets holistically.
That makes sense to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have an open public comment period, and it sounds like we'll take this up on Friday, so I'll hold public comment in connection with an actual vote and decision by the board. So thank you, Mr. Sutter. We can move on to the UVM HN information.
I'm sorry, forgive me 1 second. ADS is trying to reboot my computer right now. Let me try to deal with this.
Oh, you know what? Why don't we, yeah, they're trying to do the same thing to me. Why don't we actually take a quick 5-minute break, because we need Member Merman back as well. So we'll just come back at 1:26 and we'll get him. Thanks. We'll take a quick recess. Okay. Matt, are you back?
I am, yes, Chair Foster.
Okay. Okay, I see Member Merman. So Wesley, we can go back on the record, please. We are back on the record.
Thank you, Chair Foster. We have a handful of additional slides related to the UVM Health Network that we were wanting to share today. So here you can see their cumulative operating income since FY24. I'll just start from the top of the legend here and read it out. So the purple line is the UVM Health Network in total. So from FY24 to from FY14 to FY24, the health network generated about $326 million in operating gains. If you look at just the Vermont hospitals, there's a Vermont members, I should say. This also includes like home health and hospice as well. But if you look at just the Vermont members of the network, the income was approximately $445 million. So, and then if you follow that blue line at the very bottom, you can see the New York members of the UVM Health Network lost $98 million in cumulative losses over the same time period. Simultaneously, as of FY26 in the submitted budget, UVM was reporting $127 million in outstanding loans attributable to New York members. So with those losses, they're having to be covered somewhere, and they're coming out of the medical center. Here you can see from their funds flow analysis that UVM provides us, here's their cumulative cash investments back to New York hospitals and other New York health-related organizations from UVMC. The bottom two rows are fairly stable, so that they can see the original network affiliation obligation doesn't grow. That's just at 10.6 million. There's like another small other category, and then capital investments are growing at about $1 million a year. But that really big line, the ones that are increasing, are those outstanding loans. You can see the New York hospitals had pretty significant losses in FY23, really where those figures picked up. You'll also notice a small $2.2 million repayment in FY21. That's the only decrease we can see for those outstanding loans. We also looked at the network's operating margin and operating EBITDA margin. That's what Fitch really looks at, the EBITDA margin for rating the network. So if you see on the blue bar chart is the UVM Health Network, the green is the UVM Medical Center, and then the kind of like blue white line is the health network with the UVM Medical Center pulled out. So you can see even in like the UVM Medical Center is really bringing up the overall operating margin of the network as a whole. It's pretty significant, pretty poor operating margins in 22 and 23 when you pull them out. I know 22 the network had a 1.24% operating loss that year. If UVM wasn't in there, it'd been 8.36%. And I will say for FY24 though, you're seeing them fairly similar. There's less of a disparity there because the New York hospitals, frankly, are losing less money. If you look at the EBITDA margin, which adds back in interest, depreciation, and taxes to their operating income, you can see a similar story, right? So blue chart is UVM Health Network, green is UVM Medical Center, and then the blue and white is the health network without the UVM Medical Center. So you can see in FY22, despite the health network having just barely break even EBITDA margins, the medical center was still at almost 4%. UVM Health Network in 23 had a 4% EBITDA margin. The medical center had a 7.25. That's above, if it was viewed in isolation, like above their AA minus ratings for the year. And then, like I said, some improvement in FY24 here. And then if we also, again, looking at the funds flow analysis the UVM shares with us, you can see it's stayed fairly stable. It's like a 1% decrease, but you have seen a decrease in UVM Medical Center's estimated percent of revenue generated from New York residents. Finally, we did want to show, I understand the math can get kind of complicated with some of the rate decisions. We just wanted to show basically what the staff's recommendation is in isolation, and then including what the impact would be if you add in Act 55, the impact of FY23's rate enforcement, and then the mid-year rate decrease. So hopefully able to provide a little bit more insight into those underlying figures there. Finally, we have this available for reference. Again, we'll get these posted on the GMCD page, but here's us, so we've gone through all the staff recommendations. Now here's a summary table of all of them. And I won't go through them all. We've presented them at length, but they'll be available there. So that's what we have for additional UVM slides. I think we can move on to I'll send it back to you, Chair Foster.
Okay, thank you for that updated information. I am going to propose that we add 2 additional conditions to the UVM MC budget for purposes of addressing this issue. The first additional budget condition, and we'll have it emailed around later, but and we can vote on it on Friday, but the motion language that I would propose would be that UVM MC shall not directly or indirectly lend or otherwise transfer funds to UVM Health Network or funds or services to New York hospitals in UVMHN's network, period. And the second additional budget condition that I will propose that we move on Friday is a condition to require accounting to continue of the transfer of services and financials to New York. And that motion would be if UVM Health Network adopts a method of accounting that consolidates member hospital cash balances into a central account, Vermont hospitals UVM MC shall separately maintain contemporaneous financial records that are consistent with current network and hospital record practices. And the point of that motion is there had been some discussion in the hearing about potentially evaluating or changing some of the accounting. I believe Mr. Vincent said that they would, of course, always track this for us, and I think it would be a useful budget condition. So those are the 2 additions that I propose, and we can get them circulated and available for public comment. Any other board member discussion or comment at this time? Great. I will turn it back to Mr. Sutter.
Thank you, Chair Foster. So here we have potential motion language for Brattleboro. I don't know what's your preference for how we go through these. Should we go through all of them individually?
When you say all of them, each of the conditions?
So we have Copley, Porter, and CDMC. I know Porter and CDMC. We have the plan executive. My gosh, I'm sorry, my brain's a little bit fried right now.
I got you.
Mark's top. Yeah.
No, here I can. Let me try and help. So we will do the Brattleboro potential vote, and then we'll do the Copley potential vote, and then we will move to executive session to discuss the UVM objections. So why don't we just take the Brattleboro Hospital, and I think I can just take it, Matt. I was just going to make the motion unless you have any additional comments or views you want to share.
Chair Foster, this is Mark Hinksler. I'd be happy to just make one comment about what's here before you make the motion. And that's, if you look at items 1 through 4 here, these are standard items that tie back to those standard budget conditions that the board approved earlier today. The 2 additionals for Brattleboro are at number 5 and number 6. And I just wanted to give some quick context on what's here and why. So you'll recall last week that staff presented some options to the board and explained some concern with quality of Brattleboro's reporting going back to FY24. There was some discussion of the potential, at least consideration for the board of an independent monitor. The staff got some information from Brattleboro has been talking with Brattleboro, understands that the hospital is working with a contractor to try to sort out these reporting issues. So what's here is twofold. Item 5 is a requirement that the hospital submit an FY26 budget in a form deemed appropriate by the Director of Health Systems Finance, acknowledging that there are still some outstanding issues with the FY26 budget submission. And then item 6 is a requirement that the hospital resubmit corrected and accurate FY24 and FY25 actual operating results by a date certain. And if that didn't happen to the satisfaction of the Director of Health Systems Finance, then the board would consider a separate hearing to consider an independent observer if that's deemed necessary. So I just wanted to flag that those two are a bit different from what staff proposed as options last week.
Yes, thank you for doing that. So I'll make the motion, see if there's a second, and then we can have deliberations after that. So I move to approve Brattleboro Memorial's budget with the following modifications. Total NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 0% over fiscal year 25 approved budget, with a total NPR of not more than $113,490,959. Commercial NPR approved at not more than $32,782,822. Commercial reimbursement rate approved at no more than 2.4% over current approved levels. Subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital shall submit an approved fiscal year 26 budget in a form deemed appropriate by the Director of Health Systems Finance. And by January 31st, 2026, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital shall resubmit corrected and accurate fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 actual operating results. If these resubmitted documents remain inaccurate, as determined by the Director of Health Systems Finance, the board may hold a separate hearing to consider whether to appoint an independent observer for Brattleboro Memorial Hospital.
I'll second.
And I'll open up to board member discussion. Hearing none, I want to thank the staff and Brattleboro for working together to find the right path on this. I think this appropriately reflects the CEO's messaging to us and commitment and partnership on working and getting this right, and our staff's need for, obviously, we need to correct data. So I appreciate everyone's work on this, honestly, a little bit of a thorny issue. With that, I'll turn to the healthcare advocate.
We support this. Thank you.
And I'll take public comment via raise the hand. Seeing none, I will ask all in favor to say aye.
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 Aye, and the motion carries unanimously. I will also make this motion, and then we'll have deliberation and discussion. I move to approve Copley's budget with the following modifications. Total NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 12.1% over fiscal year 25 approved budget, with a total NPR of not more than $128,904,314. Commercial NPR approved at not more than $60,221,794, and commercial reimbursement rate approved at not more than 3% over current approved levels, subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
In terms of,
Can
go ahead, Sarah, yeah.
I just ask for one clarification? The commercial NPR reflects the 3% over current levels?
It does. Yes.
That's all. I just wanted to verify that.
I have a couple comments, and I didn't prepare them, so they'll just be kind of off the cuff here, but The birthing center issue is troubling in some ways. In one way, the state has been asking hospitals to make the kinds of hard decisions that Copley did make. And I know it's been painful for them and painful for the community and painful for the providers. And at the same time, it is a really essential service to the community, and the drive times are long from Morrisville to some other communities for care, and the prices are significantly higher. In that respect, the closure of birthing is not consistent with some of the state goals. This happened prior to some new authorities that were approved by the legislature. But at the same time, if Copley doesn't want the practice, they can't. It's hard to force someone to have a practice that they don't want and aren't going to invest in. And I understand that it might not be a question of like want might not be the right word from their perspective. I think a better solution would have been bringing more care back to Copley from some of the neighboring hospitals that are more expensive and arguably have lower quality. We also noted that the prices at Copley for some services are really pretty reasonable and actually quite low. But on orthopedics, they are in the ballpark, if in some cases not more expensive than UVM. What we don't want to see is cherry picking and lemming dropping where rate is applied to some high margin services and not others, and then have those other ones that the community needs go away. So we have been giving Copley very significant rate increases, and part of that in the past, at least from my perspective, is so that the community does not lose these services. So to now lose them is problematic, and I think Copley's financial position is frankly quite a bit better than I think initially reported, in that there is a parent company and the total cash at the parent company is over 114 days, which is very different from the reported metrics for the hospital itself. So for those reasons, I do not approve the higher rate increase that was requested. And I would actually encourage Copley to consider whether or not birthing needs to be kept or if there's an opportunity to. And I'll stop there and open it up to other board members.
I have some thoughts on this topic as well. I think it kind of bases on the idea that, we need to consider things. We need to consider quality, access, and affordability. And I think this topic of obstetrics brings up all three of these. Obstetrics has a bit of a unique relationship to our view of shoppable services versus essential or emergent services, because in many ways it's both shoppable, but it's also there can be emergent where patients don't have the opportunity to shop. So I think obstetrics just has needs to be thought of a little bit differently than some of the other services we think about. And I am a little bit concerned about the process. My understanding is AHS was not involved in discussions about this process. I know that Copley hired a consultant to do a report that I believe was really aimed at the financial impact to Copley, but that report was not shared with us. And I think out of that report and the OW recommendations of either expanding or considering closure, but in a coordinated way, the board of Copley made the decision to close. And they could have good information to make that closure decision. We just don't have that information available to us in the report. And I'm not aware of an analysis that was done to look at the population, not just the hospital, but what about the people who live in Lamoille County? Well, it's about an hour from Copley to UVM. It's a lot longer in areas that it's a half hour to Copley. So it could be an hour and a half to UVM easily for patients who live in the Copley service area. I also don't know if there's been an analysis done to the financial impact of Vermonters, of our communities, of what Chair Foster brought up, that the prices are largely higher at other institutions. So I would support an adjustment to this staff recommendation, and I think there's some things that need to be discussed further about the future of access to this care in that community.
Member Merman, I'll just ask what you referenced a potential different path
Yeah.
than the staff recommended. What is that?
I think it would be reasonable to reduce the NPR growth by removing in some of the submissions in the presentation from Copley, it appears that the birthing center generated about $3.2 million a year of revenue. So I think that could come off of NPR. My sort of estimate of that would be, if we were to take all that 3.2 out of commercial, that would be a negative commercial rate increase for Copley. I felt that a 0% rate increase would be appropriate. And I don't know what to do with the expense, but we're not, I don't think we need to modify the expenses on that. I mean, we could consider reducing the expenses by the birthing center, but I'm not sure what that gets us.
I'll just ask for other board member discussion and comment.
I guess I can hop in here. I think we're all facing similar challenges with this budget submission. Obviously, it includes this closure of this low margin service, birthing, which we all, I think, can agree is an essential service, and coupled with an expansion of two very high margin services, the lab and radiology, and also adding a fourth OR. If you look at the margins anticipated on both of those service lines, they're very, very high. So I too share concerns about the choices here and about the closure of the birthing center. And I want to echo Chair Foster's comments. It is a low margin service, and Copley has lost money. But the question is, was that a rate allocation decision? Were board authorized commercial rate increases disproportionately applied to services like ortho and not to OB? It's difficult for us to back that out and understand that. As Member Merman said, the external assessment was not shared with us, so we don't know what that consultant's analysis was. We don't have data on the birthing outcomes at Copley. We do know that low volumes are generally associated with higher risk of poor outcomes for mother and baby. So, there is a quality perspective that we would need to consider here. We just don't have all of that data. So it's a very challenging position for us to be in. Copley was a 5-star hospital in 2022. They're a 3-star hospital now. So quality is slipping. They need to focus their efforts on ensuring high quality outcomes. So it's a challenge for us because we don't have all of the complete set of data. This will go forward as we have some new authorities to assess service line reductions at hospitals, and we can request and gather this data and do this analysis. In the meantime, we did ask AHS, the agency leading statewide delivery, system reform and care transformation, to opine on this birthing center closure. In their letter to the Green Mountain Care Board, they did not raise alarms about the closure, did not express grave concerns about compromised access to OB care in the area. They didn't request the GMCB reverse this decision in our budget process. So, there's not a lot there either for us to go on. At the point that I'm at, I support the staff's recommendation for a rate reduction from what Copley requested. I think those recent large rate increases that we have given Copley over the last few years were designed to allow Copley to make margin while providing access to high value essential services. Now they're cutting a loss generating birthing center and expanding very high margin labs, radiology, and OR capacity. It's not clear to me they need a rate increase that exceeds our budget guidance. I'm not even sure they need 3% at this point. So I, welcome other comments about this. I think that, we may be needing to see if there's potentially, they could be underestimating the revenues they're going to generate by this new OR, this expanded lab and radiology capacity, or, revenue from labs and radiology. So we may need to be monitoring the revenue generated from these service lines. And potentially, if we do approve this 3%, look for potentially mid-year adjustments if they're exceeding those revenue targets. So those are my thoughts. This is a difficult budget.
I would make a motion to amend the staff recommendation and see if there's any other if there's other interest in it. So if that's all right with you, Chair.
Hang on. Let's finish the deliberation, and then
Sure.
you'd have to make a friendly amendment.
Yep.
However, I greatly respect and appreciate your view on this. I completely understand where you're coming from. I think we'll take the vote on this because I don't want to actually make an amendment. So we can, if this motion loses, it loses. Or if the other board members indicate they're not supportive of my motion, I'll withdraw the motion. The reason for that is really that I know that Copley reached out to AHS and myself about this process. It wasn't like they did this sort of in the dark of night or in an inappropriate way. My perspective is that this all started because I think they were trying to make a decision that was difficult and in the best interest in their views of their community. However, the state's process through the AHS transformation plan and Act 126 things went really fast in terms of when changes need to start happening. And the AHS process wasn't there yet, right? And the statewide plan is until 2028. So there's a bit of this like timing issue where things are more expedient. And I think that there is some level of that Copley was trying to do what the state was asking and didn't necessarily get everything it needed, I think, from the state. So the reason, Member Merman, that I support this motion is that there are more reserves at Copley than we had initially thought. And a 3% approval allows them to look really hard at whether or not they can continue the service. And it buys them a little time for this process to happen in a different way. I understand everyone's view on that, but I do think that if they had a little bit more time, they can come back and give the information, and they have the money, in my view, with this rate to look at that and keep it potentially, and talk about whether or not they can get the care from other higher priced hospitals and take a look at that aspect of this. But anyway, I'll stay that and let me hear from the other members.
Can I speak?
Please.
Thank you. So I do find this decision very difficult, and I was extremely disappointed in the decision Copley made to eliminate the birthing center. At the same time, I'm not ready to lower their NPR in a way to change that decision or try and influence a change in that decision. I agree with Chair Foster that there appears to be enough revenue here that Copley could make a decision different if they wanted to. However likely or unlikely that is. So I am inclined to support the staff recommendation and not entertain a further amendment.
It is a difficult decision, and I don't have a lot to say that hasn't already been said. I too am in support of the staff recommendation here.
Okay. So Member Merman, I'm going to take a roll call vote on this, as it appears that there are likely 3, unless you have more you'd like to discuss, which of course, please do.
I mean, I can appreciate where you all are coming from. I don't think this is an easy decision. I agree with the concept that a lot of cards are in motion, and this would be very challenging to maintain this access. I would like to see a plan that clearly delineates how emergency access can be obtained in the Lamoille County. I mean, as an emergency provider, one of the biggest fears and nightmares that we all have is the critical, complicated obstetric emergency without obstetric backup. This is when there's discussions about OB deserts in our country. It's not the quality of care. My understanding, Copley's obstetric quality has been excellent for a long period of time. That's my at least anecdotal view and from what I've been told. But so yes, you may get theoretically higher quality care at a larger institution. I think that data applies more to urban settings where there's one hospital 6 blocks away and one hospital 12, and it's quite a bit different. There is data though in areas where there is not good access to obstetric care, that for the people who do not make it to the larger institution, that the outcomes are substantially worse. And so that's really where my concern lays on this topic. And there may be ways to have reasonable processes and backups in place so that emergent obstetric care still has a solution better than what it is in communities where there is not obstetrics available, and it's left to the emergency providers who are trained, but it's a whole different level of experience. So I think that's where my major concern is on this topic. I also think I've been told for years and years and years that Copley has one of the nicest birthing centers around, and people choose to go there. So I think for a lot of people, it's going to be a loss in that regard. But that's my major concern. But I do think if this friendly amendment was accepted, I think I would be completely willing to come back and consider a later budget adjustment if there were decisions made that protected and preserved this access that I'm most concerned about.
Thank you. I'll turn to the healthcare advocate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this board members for this thoughtful and challenging discussion. We also felt challenged as we spent a decent amount of time thinking about this issue. We did submit a public comment. I'm not sure if that's been distributed, but we did submit a comment both to Copley leadership and to the board. I think our high-level message is we also oppose the closure. Exactly how to facilitate, and that we ask everyone to take a deep breath and pause and consider how to avoid this closure. Exactly how sort of the decision-making process in front of you plays into that. I suppose, theoretically, it could be accomplished here in the motion in front of you, or it could be accomplished in another way with a further request from Copley, I think, or maybe there's ways I'm not considering. But that I also just want to recognize that the community came together in a really thoughtful and powerful and convincing way to speak to all of us about this, about how passionately they feel about this, and acknowledge that. I think that's my meandering comment. However, it needs to be done. We ask that people step back from the brink of this closure and consider ways to either temporarily maintain ownership at Copley while the community attempts to stand up an alternative, or some other way to maintain access to this important care. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I'll open up to public comment via the raise the hand function. Mr. Wooden.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate all the comments. This has probably been the most difficult decision I've ever have made working in 6 hospitals, been a CEO over 4 of them. Most difficult decision for the board ever to make. In any comments about them not taking into consideration folks' input or seriously listening or having people express themselves is really not true. They would take offense to that because we did go through a pretty deliberative process. So it's been very difficult. I think people have poured over this, but we thought it was definitely in line with the Oliver Wyman report, grow or shift the birthing other organizations. The issue of growth would mean that we would have to potentially look at stealing births from North Country, St. Johnsbury, who currently have more volumes than Copley, which doesn't make any sense. And then we're all sort of fighting over scraps. These were considered in detail by the report we had from Helms and Company. And for folks to claim that they haven't seen the report, maybe we're not keeping up with what Matt Sutter has asked of us. Matt has asked us for a copy of that report. We're happy to give it to them, just asking that it be kept confidential, but we're still waiting for a response from the Green Mountain Care Board to get a copy of that report. So
let me just interrupt you, Mr. Wood. You have
Sure.
to put in the process for confidentiality is you have to put in a request.
Okay, I'm learning that right now, but I know my CFO has been talking to Jeff. He has not sort of expressed that, so that's news. We're happy to share that. We're not, the report, there's some sensitive aspects of it. I just want to say that we're not holding on to that report. The main reason why we did it is because we were certainly prompted because of our lower and lowering volumes going in the wrong direction, certainly not in line with anything close to 200 births a year. In fact, we were looking at between 160, 170. This year, we're down to well underneath 100. So the lowering volumes in healthcare, you could argue this, but it's hard to argue that volume doesn't correlate with quality. There is some correlation. It's found in radiology. It's found in anytime you get medical malpractice insurance and you have to ask people to credential you, there is not always, there's very often a volume associated factor. So we've got lowering volumes, concern over quality, and some quality is not appearing before the public because it's done through peer review. And the money aspect of it. So those are the three things, volume, quality, and the money, which is pretty staggering. So we're happy to share the report. We did talk to Green Mountain Care Board and AHS. We did remove the NPR from the request of 128,900,000. So that's already been removed in terms of the revenue from that. So yeah, we do have a high Medicaid, but these are really tough decisions. I don't know how we're going to do any healthcare transformation. We've closed a couple of other smaller services, but I think Maine closed 3 birthing centers recently. If North Country closed, I think that would create an OB desert because there's nowhere to go. That would be very detrimental if you look at a map. But currently, the majority of people in our county don't go to this hospital. Actually, the majority of the people where Copley is the closest hospital, which is separate than just the county, they don't go to Copley. So if you really look at the data, I think there's some opportunity here. We all thought we were making the right decision, but if it's that difficult for this one, I'm not sure how we could go through any other decisions. That's all I want to say, but I appreciate these are very difficult times and we're trying to figure things out. So that's all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wooden. I appreciate those perspectives. Thank you for speaking. In terms of like making any decision, this one is harder. There have been a number of decisions that have been made in other hospitals. Certainly when you get into obstetrics and maternity care, it is a more difficult one for sure. And I know that you guys have all struggled quite mightily with this issue. So thank you. Other public comment, please.
Yes, I have my hand up. Can you see me?
I can't, but I know the voice. Representative Iacovone.
Dave, yeah, I can't do it by voice. Thank you. I'll be very, very brief. Healthcare transformation can't start first on clinical services. It really should start first on administrative costs. Those may be happening, but the community hasn't seen them. We must look at ways to reduce administrative costs first and do that transformation before we look at clinical. And I would just ask the board to try to, and I know you have in the past, but to try to make that happen in this instance. As to access declining, a little analogy, if I may, I was very involved with the higher education in Vermont. And when people started talking about possibly closing what was then called Johnson State College, enrollment went down, not surprisingly. When people start talking about closing a birthing center, wouldn't you think enrollment might start going down? This isn't, you can't just look at this 12-month period and think there's not interest in this service. It's been influenced by the actions that have been taken. And despite the board's best efforts to be transparent, sadly, it hasn't felt that way to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Iacovone, and we appreciate your involvement in the community's involvement. I would actually just, if you don't mind, echo what Representative Iacovone said, that we really should be looking at unnecessary expenditures first. And I know within the four walls of Copley, it doesn't have a large administrative operation. However, across the state, there is. And this was my point this morning with SVMC. Where are we going to get the money? And the answer is there are places where there are healthcare dollars that could be used for this. I also think that we need 14 full back office and C-suites at all of these hospitals across the state. I think we should see a consolidation of some of the C-suite operations. I think I'd rather see that happen than closure of birthing. And I encourage Voz and I encourage Copley and the other hospitals, given that this motion likely will be approved, to get together and see if there's an opportunity to do that and re-look at this issue, at least for a little bit longer, because I think that there is money and savings that can happen, but it's going to be painful. It will be people's jobs and it will likely be administrators' jobs. But I would rather have that happen than closure of sensitive services. And I know that's tough, but this is too. Any other public comment? Mr. Henksler, could you take a roll call, please?
Yes, this is a roll call vote. I will ask each board member if you approve the motion, you say yes or no. Starting with Member Holmes,
Yes.
Member Merman,
No.
Member Teachout,
Yes.
Member Walsh,
Yes.
and Chair Foster.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, let me see where we were. I'm sorry, there's a lot on the calendar today. Oh, yes. The board wanted an opportunity to discuss the letter we received from UVM Health Network. The University of Vermont Health Network objected to a number of things. I believe the letter is publicly posted or will be very soon, but they objected, that I recall, to the board's ability to cap NPR for commercial payers. They objected to the board's ability to prohibit them from increasing certain service rates above the board caps. And they objected to the board's ability to limit the pay raises for the executives of the network that's paid for by the member hospitals. There may be others, but it's posted, and we need to discuss the legal objections. So I move to make a finding that premature general public knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion carries. Second, I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1F for the purpose of seeking counsel from the Green Mountain Care Board's counsel. Attendance at the executive session will include the board members, counsel, and necessary Green Mountain Care Board staff.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. So we'll take We'll go into the executive session. We'll recess from here. I'm going to guess it's about 45 minutes, and we'll post on the website here when we'll be back if it takes a little bit shorter or longer. So we'll go to recess and then we will come back. Thank you.
I don't hear anything.
Okay, Wesley, are you back?
I am.
Great.
Ready to
All
go
right.
back on the record?
Yes, let's do that. Thank you.
Okay, we are back on the record.
Okay. All right, we'll resume our hearing September 10th. I want to briefly turn to our counsel, Mark Henksler, before we take up the Porter and CVMC budgets.
Thanks, Chair Foster. I just wanted to present briefly an alternative motion to the language that was presented last week for a UVM MC charge master and rate condition. I presented some language last week and I want to present an alternative. This alternative is an attempt to respond to some concerns that UVMMC through the network addressed in its objection letter to the board. So I'm just going to quickly pull up what I presented last week and then what I wanted to bring forward as an alternative. Just give me one moment. Okay. So what I'm going to just fly through is what I presented last week and then another option for the board to consider. I'll just state that the board's not going to vote on this today, but I just wanted to get this before the board to consider and internally deliberate on so that board members are ready to discuss options on Friday when the board is deliberating on UVMMC. So to start, what we presented on last week was the condition that UVMMC have a more restrictive set of requirements when it comes to its rate and its charge adjustments. So the rate condition was that UVM's commercial reimbursement be reduced by at least the amount that the board determines for the cap. Second, that for each payer, UVM's commercial reimbursement for each service be reduced by that same amount under the FY25 contracted amount, that the reimbursement rate overall with respect to any payer be being able to be less than that, and that UVM would comply with Act 55. The proposed charge condition was that charges be reduced by that same figure, that charges for individual services be reduced by at least that amount under the FY25 amount in alignment with the reduction to rates, and that if any reduction to charge for a physician service would result in less Medicare reimbursement, that the hospital could take those few distinct charges and make any adjustments necessary to ensure the full Medicare reimbursement. So in its objection letter, the network pointed to good faith efforts that it is making to lower the prices of some services that it has determined are too high, and demonstrated or explained that the services that it's targeting are services in outpatient, and explained that the 4.9% overall reduction would be potentially counterintuitive to the goal of giving the network and UVMMC the latitude to make downward adjustments that get more to the goals of that some of the goals that the board has described. So what I want to do is just pull up a quick proposal of an alternative. This is a proposal that, again, UVM's commercial reimbursement would be reduced by an amount set by a board. This is a cap. Second, that for each payer, UVM's reimbursement for each inpatient and professional service be equal to the FY25 contracted amount, meaning a 0% change in inpatient and professional from FY25 to FY26. And then next, that for each payer, UVM's reimbursement for each outpatient service be no greater than the FY25 contracted amount, with all rate reductions applied to outpatient services. So in other words, if there's a whatever the total, let's say reduction is, that reduction would be targeted to outpatient services exclusively. UVM would have latitude to make whatever downward adjustments to any services in outpatient that it negotiated with payers, but in no event would inpatient, outpatient, or professional services for any particular service be greater than what they're contracted for 25. Then there's similar language for as described before. And this condition language for charge is it just follows the same logic, with charges for inpatient and professional remaining at 25 amount and with outpatient services being reduced. And the lesser of Medicare item is still there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but just wanted to get that alternative available to the board.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. I think the purpose here is that, we just heard from SVMC that they need money because of this issue, and there's a large margin here. We know 95% of the system-wide margin has been requested by the health network. These purposes of this is to protect Vermonters from these rising costs. And I think your proposal is an alternative that I'm interested in hearing feedback on. If UVM does argue this is unlawful, an alternative would also be to lower the rate further so that we have the same effect, because we know that this is a reason why a number of the financial problems are happening. And the only way to protect against that without the caps like this that we know of is to further reduce the rate so that it doesn't go excessive with increased MRIs or CTs or whatever it may be, or different rate allocations that are proving to be problematic. So I am interested in feedback on these suggestions. And I see that Porter is up. So I will make the motion on Porter. I move to approve Porter's budget with the following modifications. Total NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 3.4% over fiscal year 25 approved budget, with a total NPR of not more than $134,821,993 and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses from the proposed budget of $28,649. Commercial NPR approved at not more than $68,268,423. Commercial reimbursement rate approved at no more than 2.9% over current approved levels, with overall change in charge approved at the minimum amount necessary to effectuate this change, subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
And any board discussion or deliberation? Hearing none, I'll ask the healthcare advocate if they have any comment.
We support the recommendation. Thank you.
And any public comment via raise the hand. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion is unanimously approved. I'll ask Member Merman to exit.
Is this our final item of the day?
Yes.
I have no new or old business for the board, so I'm just going to sign off now then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Merman. I move to approve CVMC's budget with the following modifications. Total NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 3.5% over fiscal year 25 approved budget, with a total NPR of not more than $301,641,023 and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses from the proposed budget of $63,993. Commercial NPR approved at not more than $156,257,001. Commercial reimbursement rate approved at not more than 2.9% over current approved levels, with overall change in charge approved at the minimum amount necessary to effectuate this change and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
Second.
Any board comment or deliberation? Hearing none, the healthcare advocate, do you have any thoughts?
We support the motion. Thank you.
And I'll open up to public comment. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye, and the motion is approved. Mr. Hanksler, I'm just gonna check. I am correct that there was nothing else on today's agenda.
That's right.
Great. Well, thank you for all your work at HSF and legal. You guys work so tremendously hard and such a immense commitment to public service, and I respect it and admire it and appreciate it very much. And with that, I'll ask if there's any old or new business for the board. And Wesley, thank you very much for your assistance today. It was nice to meet you, and thanks for your help. I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Have a nice evening.